This next story is so ridiculous, I had to double take to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me or it wasn't some parody account. So the official CIA Twitter said the following: the Stinger missiles supplied by the United States gave Afghan guerrillas, generally known as the Mujahideen, the ability to destroy the dreaded Mi-24D helicopter gunships deployed by the Soviets to enforce their control over Afghanistan. This is the CIA bragging about arming radical Islamists. This is the CIA bragging about arming the people who later became factionalized, broke up, and they gave us Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. The CIA is bragging about arming Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And by the way, that came back to bite us in the ass in a phenomenal way with a little thing called 9/11. I am floored that this was posted. How did this clear either whoever the person is that runs the Twitter account or a room full of people who decide was posted on the Twitter account? How did this clear that room? How did this clear that room? Are you kidding me? And just so everybody understands, this was in like the 1980s, this was the consensus. The consensus was, oh, these are the good guys. We have the Cold War going on. We're so against the Soviet Union that we will arm anybody who's fighting them. So the Soviet Union was in Afghanistan fighting a war there, occupying there. And we armed radical Muslims to beat back the Soviet Union. But of course, turns out when you arm the radical Muslims and give them more power, they enforce draconian theocratic law. And that's what they did. Some of the people that we armed were well known for throwing acid in women's faces. One of them beheaded a teacher because that teacher was teaching women. This is who we got in bed with. And there was a newspaper at the time, The Independent, which is a British paper, praising bin Laden for like a warrior on the road to peace or something along those lines. They had a picture of him and everything. This was in The Independent at the time. Like a glowing profile of bin Laden. Then you have the famous picture of Reagan meeting in the White House with the Mujahideen. It's a very famous picture now. You know, you've probably seen it at one point or another. I think we've shown it on this show a number of times. So it's amazing to me, though, that like you can have this event in history. Now it's universally understood that what we did was psychotic. And the CIA is bragging about it as if it was positive, as if there were no negative side effects. I mean, this is what happens when you arm radical Islamists, when you arm any sort of radical extremist. By the way, you know another group that we're arming today? We're arming neo-Nazi factions in Ukraine because those neo-Nazi factions are against Russia. And that's actually, by the way, something Obama refused to arm factions in Ukraine because he viewed it as such an escalation with Putin and Russia. Trump got in there and he armed them. And then still the idiots in mainstream media in the US accused him of being a puppet of Vladimir Putin when he literally just armed neo-Nazis who are fighting Russia. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And this, guys, just so you know, this isn't like a thing of the past. It's on the record that General Petraeus was saying recently, within the past 5 years, we should arm Al-Qaeda to fight ISIS. This is what he said. We've armed extremists on the ground in Syria. We've armed Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has armed Al-Qaeda on the ground in Yemen because they're fighting the Shia Houthis who took over the government there. This is what we do. And then we're surprised, or we act surprised, when there's this thing that happens called blowback. The unintended consequences of an interventionist foreign policy. And you arm all these people, and turns out the so-called moderate rebels are rarely, if ever, moderate. And here we are. The CIA is bragging about arming the Mujahideen in 2021. I've never seen anything this absurd. And by the way, this totally blows up the whole notion that we care about freedom and democracy and human rights, because we're arming the people who are the biggest enemies of freedom and democracy and human rights. The biggest enemies. And this isn't just here. We've armed right-wing extremists in Central and South America too. This is standard operating procedure. But it's amazing to me that they don't understand that if you say this shit publicly, nobody's going to agree with you. Nobody on Twitter is going to be like, yeah, that was awesome when we armed Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Everyone's going to be like, what? And now, by the way, you know who really controls politics in this country. You know, it's corporations and billionaires. They control our politics, and also what's traditionally called the deep state. I know it sounds conspiratorial, but it's really not. Think about it. Just think about it objectively. Who stays in power from administration to administration? Who is not subject to the political winds and the times? It would be the intelligence agencies, correct? That's right. So these are the psychopaths who are really controlling the country, running the country. And this is what they're doing with your tax dollars in your name. Are you proud?